Today, we're going to talk about what's currently occurring with regards to the weather. Ongoing current rainfall and weekly activity. We're currently monitoring the high impact dry season. This is characterized by significant atmospheric stability and a growing hydrological deficit. The prevailing weather pattern is dominated by a strong Atlantic high pressure system, and that is effectively capping the atmosphere, which prevents the development of deep convective rain clouds. This stability has restricted precipitation to brief, shallow showers that provide only surface wetting, while passing low-level troughs brought temporary cloudiness and localized rainfall over the recent weekend. These rainfall events fail to deliver the sustained soaking rain required for meaningful environmental recovery. Furthermore, the pressure gradient from this system is producing moderate to brisk winds and hazardous marine conditions, with northeasterly swells currently ranging from 7 to 11 feet. The significance of current weather situation. We entered 2026 with a significant deficit, about 37.4%, from the previous year wet season. The dry topsoil is absorbing this moisture before it can reach the John Compton Dam, and this remains the John Compton Dam remains at a significant low level. The rainfall deficit so far, the numbers show that in Lucia, we have been in the red, that meaning that we have been receiving below normal rainfall accumulation since 2025, leading into 2026. And as of February 2026, the cumulative rainfall deficit stands at negative or at a deficit of 39.7% at the George Charles Station. That is an increase of about 2.3% as compared to the end of the wet season. So that's an addition to the already deficit we had at the end of the wet season. The historical benchmarking, when comparing the water year June to February so far, we use the water year from June to May is considered a wetter year. So up to date is June to February so far. At the George Charles Station for 2026, it has emerged as the second driest on record. While the all-time low remains the 51.7%, which occurred in 2010. And most of you will remember during that same year we had Hurricane Thomas affecting us. The current trajectory reinforces the severity of the ongoing meteorological and hydrological drought. Understanding the recovery gap, our recovery threshold is currently high. Recovery would require enough rain to soak through the parched earth and trigger runoff into the rivers. Extreme rainfall events are capable of producing such volumes of water. Pending this level of saturation, any light rainfall is simply absorbed by the ground. So we have not been receiving this significant heavy rainfall that we need to sustain and replenish our reservoirs and maintain the flow at the John Compton Dam. Looking into the future, current models project that there's a high probability of continued below normal rainfall, presently in an evolving drought situation. So where we are at present is in an evolving drought situation, which we all can notice and experience. And it looks likely that this will continue towards the end of our dry season up until May. When we have such dry conditions, we have a higher probability for bushfires to occur. And with the brisk winds, this could lead to the spreading of bushfires over a wider range. So we would like to recommend that persons resist burning some leaves and bushes near their houses. This is not recommended at this time. The seas are also quite hazardous around this time because of the brisk winds, and this is generating some high sea swells, mainly from the Atlantic side. So those persons along the East Coast should pay attention and exercise extreme caution. But moving on, public guidance and action, managing the risk and recommendations. We have to think about conserving our water. In light of these escalating risks, we recommend immediate public action and enforcement of mandatory risk mitigation measures. Mandatory water conservation protocols should be strictly observed nationwide. And residents are encouraged to utilize harvested rainwater for non-potable requirements such as cleaning and irrigation. To prevent fire hazards, authorities should tighten restrictions on all outdoor burning, particularly during windy periods. Finally, regarding maritime safety, small craft operators, especially vessels under 30 feet, must exercise extreme caution, and sea bathers are advised to stay away from the beaches along the East Coast due to hazardous swell activity. And this concludes my presentation.
Okay, so just continuing off where the director of the Med Services left off, we've just looked at some of our selected stations in terms of the rainfall so far for March. And I must say that as an agency, we're very pleased with what we're seeing. One would notice that over the many days and weeks we've been getting rainfall, it's been very consistent, although very short in duration. But it is so far it has not been a very dry season. So from a meteorological and agricultural drought perspective, we are not in that zone. We're looking more at the hydrological aspect of it. So for the meteorological and the agricultural, so far we've been doing very, very well. So up until the 16th of March, I must say that we've received very high rainfall amounts. And when we look at the climatological mean for March, we can see that the volumes so far are relatively close or very high, more than 50%. In some areas, 70% in terms of rainfall so far for the month when compared to the climatological mean. So if we can look at Union, so far we received 63.2 millimeters of rainfall. And when we compare to February, we only got 19.7 millimeters, right? So we can see that, the vast difference in terms of rainfall that we received so far. And looking at our other stations as to Bath 96.1 and Millet 102.8 millimeters so far. And I must say that for us as a country, in terms of where the JCD is located, I mean, it is very, very strategic because that area is a very high rainfall area. And that definitely means that we benefit when it rains. Right. So just doing the comparison for the last year that we've had water-related emergency, we can see for the month of February for Union, for the dry season 2023-2024, we received 65.4 millimeters compared to 19.7 millimeters so far for this year. And for Bath, it was 45.6 in the dry season 2023-2024. And for this year, 31.1 millimeters. So in terms of rainfall, we have been receiving rainfall, but on a daily basis, like I say, but it's consistent but of very short duration. So that means for the month of March, we didn't receive any kind of groundwater recharge. That water basically stayed in the topsoil, and through the evaporation processes, that did not make its way into the ground water process. Right. So last weekend we did receive moderate to significant rainfall, and that has been advantageous in terms of the level of the JCD. As of the 17th of March, the water was over the spillway, right? And that was due to the rains that we received so far for the month of March. And on Saturday, we received a significant amount of rain across many of our stations. So as we can see, on the 14th at Millet, we received 22.1 millimeters. At Union, 21.6 millimeters, George V Park, 25 millimeters, and Bath, 16 millimeters. So it was a very wet day, right? And that aided in terms of raising the volumes at the JCD. And when we compare to the water levels for 2024, that is our comparative year, we realize that for the most part, the trend, it has basically followed the same trend. Coming from January into February, we realized that the trend patterns were basically the same. It fell between the 21st of February to the 3rd of March, but after that, with the rainfall into the system, it did go over the spillway, following the same trends as the previous year. So, like we say, we're still in monitor mode, right? Because we haven't seen a significant difference, except for the period I just mentioned, in terms of the levels at the JCD. And when we're talking about the levels, probably about a foot plus or minus a few inches in terms of the difference. So basically, we're still in monitor mode because we're looking to see what is going to be coming in the future as it relates to the forecast by Miss Saltibus, right? And we could look at the trends of the rainfall patterns for the month of February coming into March. And like we say, the dry season is something that happens every year. Every year we expect a dry season. In Saint Lucia, we have a wet season and a dry season. And the dry season, we receive less rainfall. Also, the number of dry days increases. So as we can see here for February, it was a very dry February in terms of the days that there was no rainfall into the system. And when we did receive rain, it was basically a very low rainfall amounts. And the spike, like I mentioned, on the 14th of March, this is where we got a significant spike in rainfall. And we're very grateful. We're very grateful for that because we're just past the halfway mark into the dry season. So whatever precipitation that comes into the system would definitely help, right? But so far, we have not received the rainfall volumes that would aid with infiltration and percolation. Most of the rainfall that we received so far, because of the soil conditions, remain in the root zone, and through evapotranspiration or overland flow, it does not make its way into the groundwater system. So we can see the patterns are the same in terms of the number of dry days that we have and relatively low rainfall for Union, George V, Bath, and Millet. So Millet is one of the high rainfall areas, and I'll just make mention or speak to that a little further in a bit, right? So like I say, as an agency, this is what we're monitoring. So even if we're seeing the rainfall across the island, for us, it is what is happening with the soil conditions to allow for infiltration and percolation into the groundwater system, because it is the groundwater that sustains our rivers, right? So we need that injection. And since we started in January, we did indicate that we had a very dry, wet period, right? So in terms of the soil moisture in the soil moisture as it relates to groundwater, this was extremely low. And so far, because of the distribution of rainfall, it has exacerbated that situation, right? So in the dry season, and especially what we're going through now, in terms of the rainfall and the processes associated with it, the main beneficiaries would be the households, persons who practice rainwater harvesting, and also the John Compton Dam. And the reason I say that is because soil conditions are dry. When you have spikes in rainfall or you have moderate to significant rainfall, that water tends to run off into our rivers and stream. It does not infiltrate and it does not percolate. So what you would find is that our rivers, the water levels in our rivers would rise. But as we would know that the JCD is our only reservoir. So the JCD would be able to store that water, whereas the other catchments that are operated by WASCO, they would not be able to store that water. So that water would make its way out to the sea. And also because of turbidity, at that time, they may have to shut down the system. So they are not in a position to take advantage of that increase in water flowing into the rivers. And since that water is not attributed to groundwater, you would find that in a relatively short period of time, we would go back to the regular, extremely low base flows. So from a hydrological perspective, this is what we're working with, and WASCO depends on the water resources from a hydrological aspect. So it's only the JCD that can take advantage. And just like I showed earlier, where we had just like I showed, where from the 13th and 14th, where we had if you look at the orange, where the levels of the JCD actually increased, and then we had water going over the spillway, right? And then we know that the issues with the JCD in terms of the silt. So the water that is actually going over the spillway, that is water that could have actually been captured under ideal conditions as part of storage that could have been used later. So these are the issues that, as an agency and WASCO, we look at. So it's not only the rainfall, but actually what is happening in the entire environment, right? So then I mentioned in terms of for rainwater harvesting. So whether it's the wet season or the dry season, it is always an advantageous time for rainwater harvesting. So we're talking about the dry season, right? And when we look at adaptation to climate change, variability, this is something that I think every individual has to take into consideration, because we're looking at additional sources of water to complement the potable water that is being produced by WASCO. So it's looking at alternative sources, additional sources of water, as well as increasing storage. So in essence, everybody has to be, like I mentioned before, basically they own WASCO in a sense, storage, in some cases treatment, and managed distribution, if you're looking at a household or a business establishment. So just as an example, you just have a household in Saint Lucia, which is located between Castries and Millet, right? So the total roof space is 117 meters square, but only 47% of that roof is dedicated to rainwater harvesting. So like I said, on the 14th, in the Millet area, we got 22.1 millimeters, right? And George the fifth, which is Castries, 25 millimeters. So if we round it off to 20 millimeters of rain, just from that rainfall event for that one day, that household would have been able to capture 244 gallons of water. So that's almost five 50-gallon drums that you would have been able to capture on just that one day. So if the entire roof was being used, that would have been over 500 gallons of water, and that's just for one rainfall event. But like we say, in the dry season, there is rainfall. So every time it rains, it would more or less be a recharge, a top up, so to speak, in terms of that household being able to capture water. And most of what we do on the premises don't require potable water. So that way, there will be a longer duration of the potable water that is received by WASCO. And implementing water conservation practices, that is something that would ensure that that water would last over a longer period of time. So every time it rains, it's a recharge to that individual system, and that is what we want to push, because it rains, but because of conditions, it may not be advantageous at the time to getting back into the rivers that WASCO can access that water supply. So the sustainability of the base flows right now is due to water that has been in the system for a few weeks or a few months prior. So this is what we want to encourage persons to understand. This morning it rained, so whoever's practicing rainwater harvesting would be able to capture that water, whether it's a bucket, 2 buckets, 10 buckets, a drum. That is water that will be used. As long as there's water on the premises, it will persons will get to use that water. We're hoping that the hydrological aspect changes as quickly as possible, but in the meantime, we're seeing there are options, and we encourage persons to take advantage of those options, right? So for our watershed conditions, Canries River is it's a watershed that is I would say very viable in the dry season. So in terms of the flows are more than satisfactory for every dry season when compared to some of our other river systems. So we can see that March 4th, and this is the downstream. There are not too many abstractors on that river except for WASCO, and we can see the high volumes in the river on March 4th. And even into February where we had the dry, basically it was extremely dry month. We can see the high volumes or the high base flows in the Canaries River. So we do expect, especially coming into from this weekend, that in all river systems there would be a marked, I say marked because it's so low, a marked increase for a short duration. And then it would go back to low base flows because, like I said, it is not sustained by the groundwater, by the groundwater because of groundwater has been exceptionally low coming from the wet season into the dry season. And the same for Talvin, we expect a marked increase March 4th. We can see that January 9th to March 4th, discharge looks relatively the same because of some rainfall events, and we expect it to continue along that vein. A marked or a notable increase, but it would return to extremely low base flows for that over the next few days or few weeks, right? So although we're receiving rainfall now and we're seeing the levels of the JCD rising, it does not mean that we're out of a very precarious situation. We continue to monitor the situation and see what the rest of the month looks like. Also going into April, and I think the Med Services did indicate that for April to June we expect lower. April to May, so we expect lower than usual rainfall volumes, right?
Conditions look like it's gonna favor drier conditions.
So it more or less favors drier conditions. So whatever we're receiving now, if it more or less manifests in that sense, the situation is going to be a bit less favorable. But like I say, we're always optimistic, and so far, coming from December all the way till now into the dry season, as an agency, we're still satisfied with what we're seeing, although for the hydrological aspect, but then the options are there, especially when we look at it from a household level. The options are there where persons can reduce or eliminate the inconveniences to them. And we encourage persons to invest in rainwater harvesting systems. It works. That's what we'll see. As long as it rains, you're going to benefit. It works, right? So at this point in time, this is all I have for now. And any questions after, I'm available.
Just to continue from where Mr. Ernest ended, we have been doing pretty well at the John Compton Dam Reservoir. You can see the levels are actually at spillway overflow. So it shows that the reservoir is full. However, you will remember that we have not dredged the reservoir significantly to retain any or to make any meaningful strides in storage volumes. But with what we have, we're quite happy with the little rates that we've been getting. But it appears that only the John Compton Reservoir, the catchment that serves that reservoir, and Talvan seems to be benefiting from that rain. Talvan is a bit flashy, so you would see some increases and then a rapid decline soon after. Okay, so you could see our two largest systems in the north, the Table system and the Hill 20 system. You could see our levels of production, they're not that bad when you compare to last year. We're doing okay. The smaller catchments, just slight variations on the negative or the plus sides. Nothing significant. The southern systems, they're not doing too bad yet at this point, but we're beginning to see some declines. Okay, and based on what was said earlier, if the conditions worsen, we expect further declines, and we will have to be more strategic in how we distribute water. So we will have to do some rationing and possible trucking. So we hope this doesn't happen, but there's a very strong likelihood that this will happen. Okay. I will skip this. All right. I will give you some updates on some significant projects that we have that's ongoing right now. You'll recall from the last briefing, we spoke about the Thibault's upgrade, Thibault's treatment plant upgrades. So we've done some significant progress from even last month. So the environmental and social impact assessment report is in its final version. We have held consultations with the community because construction will bring noise, dust, and some negative aspects in terms of traffic and pedestrians. So you could see with procurement, the bidding procurements are at the final stage. We expect CARICOM development funds approval by 20th of March. So the project documents are expected to be published for tendering by the end of March, and bids are expected by the end of April. So we're doing pretty good with this rehabilitation project, and as you can see, the estimated cost is around $5 million US. Okay, raw water pipeline, we're also making good progress on this. The community liaison officer has already been appointed. She's already active. The project engineer, we're actually in the selection phase right now. Thankfully, we received a no objection from CDB in February. So effective 30th of March, the project engineer will be selected. As well, the draft evaluation reports for the engineering firms for the design review and construction supervision. We're just awaiting the no objection from the Caribbean Development Bank. So after we've done this, the next step would be to request technical and financial proposal from the shortlisted firms. And that project is estimated to be around $30 million US. Pasias. This project, that's project in Pasias, Monrepo. Essentially, it involves the construction of an intake, a pumping station or a water pumping station, and a treatment plant with, state-of-the-art treatment plant. That's what I can tell you. Similar to the Tomaso treatment facility. So with regards to updates, the site actually is 85% complete. We're expecting to complete by the end of April. The pipeline, new intake and pump house, they're at almost 30%. So completion date around May. Water treatment plants, as I said, supplied by Suez. Manufacturing is on schedule, expected to be completed by March 26, and then have to be shipped and installed in Saint Lucia. You can see the ductile iron pipelines for the raw water pumping line. It arrived in December, so remaining items by maybe tomorrow. So overall project completion, July 2026. So essentially, it's a $2 million US project, and we're doing good progress. If in July we're finished, this project will be finished in time for the rainy season. So the problems that Monrepo would the problems that they had before with regards to highly turbid water or untreated water, not really untreated, turbid water because of lack of adequate treatment will be no more. So this is a very welcomed project.
I'm able to give you a briefing on the 20-inch northern pipeline upgrade, which is 3 of our projects to ensure that we increase our demands for the north. Yeah. So in the 1980s, WASCO installed a 14-inch cast iron, ductile iron pipe from Castries to Grosile. And to date, it's at the end of its useful life. WASCO has done some upgrades on different sections of it. As of 2022, we completed the replacement from the Monjiro Gap to the Bonte Gap, and that was successfully completed. Currently, we're looking at doing phase 2, which is from the Bonte Gap to the Grosile Gap. Okay. We have a few challenges as it pertains to this line in terms of getting the required volumes to Grosile. Okay. So the objective of this project is more or less to upgrade our water system to a 20-inch from Bonte Gap to Grosile. We are foreseeing doing that before the start of the the Sir Julian Hunt Highway and Secondary Road Improvement Project, which will be spearheaded by the Ministry of Infrastructure. So WASCO would like to complete this before this project starts. Okay. Roughly, it is at 1.1 kilometers in length. Okay. The scope of works include installing that new pipeline along the proposed utility reserve for the new highway project, which is more or less along the proposed sidewalk. So that new infrastructure will be run more or less within the proposed sidewalk of that new highway. Okay? And it includes installation of the pipes, including taking into consideration all other utility services that are below ground, because we have quite a few as well. It includes traffic management, doing our public PR. As of this week, we'll be doing some stakeholder engagement with the community and stakeholders within the general area, informing them of our intention to start the project. So that this is more or less a synopsis of the proposed highway, but our communications department will send the presentation to the different media houses so that you can get a better resolution of the project. But it's more or less from like I said, from the Bonte Gap to the Grosile Gap. There are 2 proposed roundabouts, one next to Johnson's and the other one is at the main Grosile Gap. So my apologies, this doesn't really show much as it pertains to that project. We'd also like to mention that we have currently concluded the tender process for that project. We are currently engaging both the contractor and the consulting firm for supervision of that project. We are currently awaiting an update from the Department of Physical Planning as it pertains to land acquisition, which will form part of the bigger project, which is the highway project. So once we get that information from the Department of Physical Planning, we will commence that project. It has a proposed duration of 4 months, and we are projecting that we can start, once we get all that information from the ministry, that we can start in May, maybe June the latest. Okay? So we just want to ensure the public that WASCO is committed in terms of ensuring that water infrastructure is up to date. Are we getting there for the north? Okay? So that is it for WASCO.
Thank you, Sadia. Again, another thorough presentation, and we open to your questions now. For anyone on our head table, fire away.
Let me just start off. I'm sure that in some way, measure, or form, it may have been addressed in the past. A perfect picture of what exists or what the situation is at the John Compton Dam is probably needed. What was the original situation with regards capacity, original capacity? Now that it is, for all intents and purposes, filled with silt, what is our capacity at the moment?
Come.
The John Compton Dam's original design capacity was 3 million cubic meters. Hurricane Thomas practically dumped 1.5 million cubic meters of sediment in there. So from Hurricane Thomas in 2010 to now, we would have some more sediment entering that reservoir. A bathymetric survey was done in December of last year, and it showed a slight increase in sediment, but not anything as significant as what another major storm would have brought in. So we are less than 1.5 million cubic meters in live storage for that reservoir. Yes, a little bit less than half right now. Okay.
We covered everything thoroughly. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Chelsea. That could be either good or bad, huh? That we were so thorough, or that nobody understood anything.
My question is very simple, because we are in the phase of repairs right now. When these repairs are completed, about how long, again, before we even experience any of those issues that we are experiencing now? Is it, covering everything for next, let's say,
Pretty much, but I'll let Ali elaborate.
That's a very, very general question. In terms of repairs, this thing never ends. Once your utility repairs never ends. Okay, what we do, we try to improve the situation every single time we go in there to do repairs. Okay, if you're speaking about what happens on the raw water pipeline with the emergency shutdowns we have to undertake sometimes, we've been doing pretty well. As a matter of fact, our last intervention in February, we repaired practically, I think, the biggest leak we ever had. Right. So right now, even though we still have probably around 11 or 12 smaller leaks, but what we contain is now allowing us to transport almost 8 million gallons of water D2C0. Something I think that last happened maybe 7 or 8 years ago. So we're doing some progress, but we cannot let that appear as if we've resolved the situation. The pipe is progressively getting worse. The moment we undertake a repair, there's another innocuous one popping up again, and it just keeps getting worse and worse. But so far, it's not as bad as it was. We are still able to transport, but we expect anything to happen anytime soon. So definitely, and that pipe will be replaced hopefully by the start of next year. We're just going through the procurement process right now. Okay.
Any other questions? Yes.
in relation to the
Sorry. Can you just let us know where you're? Okay.
So with the recent introduction of the scheduling system, how confident is WASCO that this is an effective measure in cushioning the impact of the ongoing water shortages? And also, are there any communities in terms of the water shortages that are most impacted?
Yes. I don't know if you have access to the revised schedule. We had one where we were practically closing off Castries on a Tuesday, Castries and the south of Castries on a Tuesday. we had adopted a mild approach, and depending how the situation unfolded, would have become more aggressive. But the thing is, we were still not able to supply the outermost communities, example, the capacity areas where there are some places where people had not experienced water in the mains for over 5 months, even though we did trucking. But as you would know, trucking is a very unsustainable way of getting water to people. So right now we have adopted a much more aggressive approach. We are practically going to be closing different sections of the network, the sections that actually receive water a lot more often, so that we can divert more of that water to the north. I think we have the schedule. I don't know if we can share it at some point. It's on our page, so you can see that. Most of the places will be closed off for just 24 hours. Okay, because 24 hours compared to months or weeks without water. That's a fair undertaking.
Okay. And in terms of water harvesting, how does WASCO intend to support persons who wish to pursue water harvesting? Okay,
I think last year it was we entered into an arrangement with a local supply of storage tanks. We're going to be doing that again, where customers would enter into a payment option with WASCO, pay over time the cost of the tank. Okay, so instead of making a one-off payment, which may be difficult for some people, the tank will be purchased over time. Okay.
Sorry. There's much talk about importation of water from Dominica. I'm sure you're smiling because that may very well be on your agenda. So the SLHTA has spearheaded that initial initiative. Is WASCO looking at that eventually?
This is an option that's been explored. I do not think that we have reached the stage where that option has to be exercised. I don't think we have reached that stage yet, but this is an option that we're exploring, because the worst thing is to be unprepared. So right now we're doing all the research and everything, getting all the costs and everything, because it's not just simple. There's water availability in Dominica. So we have to get a badge, and you have to get a specially prepared badge with a bladder to contain that water, disinfect that water when we come here, get a place for that water to be distributed and all that. So it requires a lot, but this is an option that we're definitely exploring, but I cannot tell you that this is something that we will be undertaking.